Game begin.
What is up? You sound great.
I sound great?
You sound great and you look great.
Great. Cool.
With the pink headphones. Does that microphone extend out of there?
I don't know, maybe.
Boom.
Oh my god.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Even
Nailed
better.
it. I had no idea.
Even better. The pink headset coming in clutch.
Yeah, she uses these for D&D.
Let's go. So you have a podcast, the Duress Crew Hardcast, in which
I do.
I assume that they don't allow, as a policy, your completely unrestrained and incendiary takes with regards to the band list.
They do not. Are we recording right now?
Because you've got your little show notes, you've got your sheet,
Yeah.
and you've got your like list of things we're going to talk about today. And I assume you're always sliding in a line. You're just like, today is the day we talk about how much we hate Parallax Tide, and then they just keep deleting it off, and they're just like, Billy, come on, just relax, bro. But I've got great news for you. No such sheets exist in the Spike Colony universe, where the unbridled opinions of the hosts are allowed to run rampant for hours at a time.
Yeah.
So yes, we are recording. Welcome to the podcast, Billy Mills.
Hell yeah. Okay, yeah, that's fine.
But we need a warm up. We need a warm up question. Why is it called corned beef hash?
Well, first, it's my favorite breakfast food, so I'm trying to be faithful to the cultural roots of pre-modern. I think something I do not often advocate for a traditionalist posture, but I think in this case, format identity is something that people value. It's our heritage, and I think that there are very few cases where arguments as such can be valid, but this is one of them.
So what I'm hearing is that ridiculous, useless deck names are okay when I do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Nothing applies. Things only don't apply to me or only apply to me.
In the words of the great Haley Williams, you are the only exception.
Exactly. Yes.
I have one corned beef related story. One of my roommates was basically just had the corned beef hash fixation. So she was just like, I want to make corned beef hash.
Yes.
So she looked it up. Step 1, use your leftover corned beef for the hash.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this was something that I didn't know about corned beef hash, which is that it's a leftover dish, which means that in order to enjoy corned beef hash, you must first have had corned beef for a previous meal.
Yeah. So it's actually so corned beef hash is a poverty food, and it is associated with like Britain and Ireland.
Yeah.
And
this is where we're getting into the salt beef, corned beef, and pastrami territory of foods, where they're all the same but different.
Yes. So there's a lot of layers to corned beef hash. It's a very complex food. It became popularized in the context of meat rationing in World War I and World War II. And it also there's a lot to it, man. You can make it with carrots, you can make it with hominy, you can make it with potatoes. But it's very much but it's also like it's become a breakfast food in New England. You may not know this as a New Yorker and also a Californian. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. There is a culture of breakfast train car diners in New England, and particularly in Worcester, Massachusetts, where corned beef hash became sort of like the canteen breakfast for, waste management collectors or like postal workers or cops or like people have to get up early in the morning.
The municipals.
Exactly. Yes. The people who make the world go round. And just the idea that like you can just roll up, get your eggs, toast, hash, potatoes, and coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like anything. I like anything that starts with a brisket. TBH. I feel like we're in the age of brisket here.
What's your diner breakfast?
Diner breakfast? It's gonna. Okay, so this is a complicated question because what you just mentioned goes into the question of what is a diner, and when you say diner, are you expecting like, a movie themed like a movie themed thing with like 50s like whatever? Are you expecting like a place with like a menu that is like a novel? Are you expecting like a 24-hour joint? Are you expecting a place that's special? Like I've been to every kind of diner, and
Sure.
I change my order based on the diner vibe. So my initial diner food was a movie themed diner.
Mhm.
And I would have, I think chicken fried steak was my go-to there.
Okay. All right.
Which is a ridiculous food item that I have not had since that era of me going to the movie themed diner in San Diego. I don't even know if it's still open. But that was like a family favorite, it was like a special occasion where just like going, and I would have chicken fried steak and gravy.
Okay.
I love corned beef hash.
I knew there was something I liked about you.
Yeah. And then if we're talking, like a diner themed restaurant, then you just get their fancy hamburger, right?
So do you get, I think this is the distinction. Do you get your hamburger, fries, and milkshake at the same place or a different place
you
get your eggs and toast?
Yeah. So these days I don't really get a proletariat burger from anywhere.
Okay.
I'm more of there is one place in specific in Bushwick. My friend actually owns it. It's called Blue Collar Burger. And that is actually the only blue collar burger that I partake in. So I'm not a big Shake Shack guy. I'm famously not a big Shake Shack guy. I don't really go in for Shake Shack. I think because I'm from California, you just can't dethrone In-N-Out. And to answer your question, if I'm at In-N-Out, then yes, I get my burger, shake, and fries there. But obviously, there's no eggs on the menu.
Yeah.
So, no, I don't typically like to have any burger fries situation at a diner. I'll have a shake from a diner though. But I don't really. I think that diner burgers and fries tend to be below tier, and breakfast is above tier at diners, above replacement.
The proper, from a New England perspective, the corned beef hash comes from a different restaurant than your burger and fries.
Okay. Yeah.
That like if it's open after 2 p.m., you're not going to get a good corned beef hash.
Okay, but it's not a diner. Yeah. Is it a diner? Like what? So you don't have 24-hour diners?
We do, but that's they're usually like by train stations and like airports and stuff like that.
Okay, so they're not like the sort of. Okay, I'm beginning to paint a picture of where you're coming from when you say diner, because when I was exposed to East Coast diners, it was because my friend took me out to New Jersey. And like a New Jersey diner, like is like literally a place that just serves any food. It just has a menu that's 50 pages long.
Anytime.
You can get tacos, you can get a gyro, you can get burgers and fries. Obviously, all the breakfast is there. You can get a horrible Caesar salad. You can probably get a garbage plate.
Yeah, to me, that's a Greek diner.
Okay. Yeah.
So there's also this like tone of like. From which which culinary tradition are you invoking?
Yeah.
And to me, a Greek diner is like breakfast served anytime, gyros, like salads of various freshness, baked goods, what have you. Yeah. But my favorite corned beef hash, like it's not open past 2 p.m.
Okay, yeah. So it's like a breakfast. Okay, so I like this because the corollary to this is really just that like California, Southern California especially, is like very steeped in breakfast culture, and it's this is a relatively modern thing with obviously like brunch being the main draw, brunch and avocado toast type stuff.
Yes.
Bottomless mimosa, but the reason why breakfast food can be so culturally powerful in the Southwest is obviously because the weather is good year round. So if you open a place that only serves breakfast, it is less so like the municipal hang and more so just like especially, I mean, I can't point to any like data about this, but I assume after the pandemic put us all remote, it just made it easier for you to just go out for brunch on a Wednesday morning. Which is ridiculous, right? Most people should be working, but now that we're all remote, you can just go and play hooky or whatever, or work on your laptop at a brunch joint. And it's a point of huge frustration because breakfast in New York City specifically is tailored to New York City culture, which is there is no time for anything. And so the breakfast is completely centered around bagels and bacon, egg, and cheese and like just whatever, simple, fast, and easy. And you can't, I mean, I haven't found one. You can't really get a corned beef hash around here. And even like the breakfast, like even the brunch restaurants, because the culinary culture here is so centered around dinner, chefy restaurant places just hate brunch on an operations standpoint. Because the tickets are smaller, the ingredients are different, so you have to like keep it in different places. Like there's limited space, right? So if you're like in Southern California, you have brunch restaurant, like brunch restaurants that are just only open from 9 to 3, and in New York it's just the opposite, right? You only have places that are open at 5. Like they can't even open for lunch because the staffing, logistics and inventory demands of being open for breakfast and lunch are much larger. And if you're running a place that only has, space for 40 or 50 diners, and you've got a small kitchen, you've got a small walk-in, like you just can't serve breakfast. And as a result, the places that do serve breakfast kind of suck. And then, dinner's just where it's at. But the thing is, I come from the standpoint that New York is the city of you can get anything that you want. And the fact of the matter is a Bloody Mary and a corned beef hash are probably two of the things that you would struggle to find.
I think this is interesting because like California appears to me to have a PMC breakfast culture, and New England has a proletariat breakfast culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
And New York, it's just the law of the jungle, man. Like the pressures of the price of rent there are just too extreme. You have to serve what generates revenue. No choice.
Yeah, exactly. And like the thing is, that's the kind of pressure creates diamonds of New York, which is just that like whatever food succeeds in New York is best in slot. But the thing is, certain foods can't succeed because of market forces, right? Like there's just you can't move 50 corned beef hash in like a breakfast rush, like because New Yorkers just skip breakfast. We have coffee for breakfast. Like we invented coffee for breakfast. I mean, I don't know, we probably did, but
I drink coffee for breakfast.
Yeah, same here actually.
That's why I have 3,600 calories for breakfast when I do eat it.
Right. Yeah. Same. Actually, same. Like I am not a morning person, but breakfast can turn me into a morning person. So this is like one of my. I've told the story so much. It's just that I love Australia, and a big part of the reason why I love Australia is because they have strong breakfast culture, and they have the highest quality breakfast that I've consumed ever in my life. And I've never started like, I was in Australia for 6 days. I started 6 days with like just like S-tier breakfast, and I just became a better person.
Did you have fry-ups?
I did not have a fry up. That's just like the bacon, sausage, baked beans.
Blood sausage.
Yeah.
Like black pudding, toast, beans, tomatoes, mushrooms. Like it's everything.
Yeah, the Australian, what I particularly loved about Australia was a lot of the Asian influence. So like I would have like a sort of Japanese inspired salmon and rice situation with the tornado egg, and just like, I don't know, it's just like perfect. Everything's just like seasoned, like the depth of flavor, excellent stuff. I worked in coffee for 4 years as a barista, so they have the absolute best coffee in the world that I've been to. I've been told that like Seoul, South Korea has excellent coffee, but I have yet to visit. But so yeah, this was like the thing. So with regards to corned beef hash, the deck, is there an assignment to like what element is the corned beef and what element is the hash?
Well, the hash comes from the Old French haché, which is cognate with hatchet. So it's hash is that which is chopped and diced, and corned is a process which is applied to beef. So it's not really, there's like corn and beef and hash as three separate elements.
But like the hash is like the hash could just be like the utility lands, and then the beef is just the creatures, and then the corning process is the survival of the fittest, in which all the creatures are seasoned in the deck.
Well, I think hashing is like the act of mixing up. So we could consider that process the heterogeneous mixture of a survival deck
and a turn deck.
Yeah. I think that's possible. And then corning probably refers to how salty I get when people tide me.
Just like marinated overnight.
Yeah. Well, a corn is like a little bit of like a wheat kernel is a corn. So like it the etymology of like corn, it's like it's kind of like a kernel. So you can have like wheat corns, pepper corns, salt corns. So it's like the prior to iodization of salt would be given to you in these large crystals called corns. So you would use this coarse, rough preservation quality salt. Like table salt would be fine ground, whereas like the coarse salt would be for food preservation. So it's the salted beef. So that's how salty I am.
Yeah. You're a full corn. You're coated in salt corns, not table salt, not kosher
nothing
salt.
Fine. Just
not even Malden, just like literal corn, just like the salt cavern gif.
Yes.
Just like everything is completely
like a whole
salt.
stalactite, just snap it off from the roof of the cave
and just stab you with it, just straight through the through the groin. Okay.
Exactly. So, yes. You've got the idea.
I mean, I spent my entire morning waiting for feedback on work. I am working today, but also just clicking all these checkboxes on the filtered win rate tool to debunk some of your claims, but we should start from the top.
Okay.
Parallax.
Let's start from the top.
Parallax Tide is completely effed. Like what a card, what a strategy.
Is your podcast explicit?
We've made we've fielded requests to reduce the explicitness of the cast. But we're also New Yorkers, so we kind of can't the F word is just like it's just there, you know. It's just it's like another word. So I'm not like really a like F this F that Wolf of Wall Street kind of person, but I'm also just a like this is the right word for the job, and so like, you know. That's where I stand. So no gratuitous profanity, but you know, if you want to upgrade our rating to PG-13 and then later R, feel free. It's, you know, you're our guest.
I don't want to, ruffle any feathers. I don't know. I'll defer to the host.
Sure. It's a bleep.
This is your podcast.
It's a bleeped up card that's bleeping. Yeah. I fear we would just descend into, Wolf of Wall Street level cursing if we let you like completely take the lid off. But we also want to hear this perspective, because I think that there's a lot of ways to talk about this issue. One of them is of course one of them is, of course, to take a sort of data-driven thing. So we'll start there. We are going to, I think what we should do is we should first talk about what we think the band philosophy should be, and then examine a card like Parallax Tide, and then possibly other cards under that philosophy. So the first philosophy is...
Wait, may I interrupt to offer some preface? Okay,
sure.
So it's 12:05 on Sunday, and on Saturday, I went 3-3 with corned beef hash, got 2-0'd by Replenish, and I was so butthurt that I almost dropped. And the week before that, I dropped from my local, and I was rude to somebody who I like, who deserves my respect.
Yeah.
Which is like super salty.
Yeah.
And this is like not behavior that I advocate for in this format. This is supposed to be chill and calm and mellow.
Yeah.
And everybody here in this format is like 28 and older. It's community driven, and being salty is not.
I'm right with you. So I have had some moments of bad sportsmanship. I mean, ironically, every example of like bad sportsmanship I've had, I've always just been like gone to my opponent. I'd be like, hey, I'm sorry, this stuff happened. Yeah. And then every single time they've been like, I literally don't care / didn't notice / whatever. Yeah. So thankfully, there's a lot of grace granted, and to the
community's credit.
Yeah, you don't want to. I mean, you obviously don't want to be in that place to begin with. And I think it's actually kind of, it's interesting. It's funny. I've what I do when I lose a match that I feel heated about, I just don't say anything for like 4 minutes at the table, especially with a friend, right? So like a friend just like crushes me, in a tournament match, and I'm obviously trying to win, and I'm like, doing my best, and then they just beat me. I typically just sit there and I just don't say anything, and then like a little bit later I can like talk about the match or talk about what happened. But like the moment after you like pick up your cards is the worst, because you're just like, like the moment your win percentage moves from a integer to 0 is definitely a very difficult place to be.
So this is preface chapter 1. Preface chapter 2 is at 10 a.m. I'm crying about Tide in the Discord. And I make a really stunning argument, just watertight. And I go to the PDAF, the Duress Crew, Modern Data Analysis.
Like most good arguments, it started with this idea, and then it ended with, how can I use something to make me sound like
yes, exactly. So I'm committing a scientific fallacy. And Lanny rolls up and says, hey, you were using filtered win rate. You need to use unfiltered win rate.
Oh, the opposite, the other way around. You were using unfiltered, and you should use it.
Yes. And my argument, though one can no longer stand on such firm foundation. And my argument about the 3 Tide decks being Dreadnought, Replenish, and Mono Blue Tide, being the top 3 of the 4 winning decks. And I had the wrong data selected. And what does Lanny do? Hits me up and says, sees me at my lowest. In my lowest, least evidenced. I have to record this for posterity. I've got him now. Hop on, Billy. Get on the pod. I see how this is.
If there was
LobsterCon 2024 beats Duress Crew, twisting the knife, catches me in a logical fallacy. Intellectual checkmate, says Lanny Wong. I've got you now.
This podcast would have gone so different if Mike wasn't busy right now. This is okay. So You're absolutely right. I just had to drag you through the town square.
Yes. Yes.
No. Oh yeah. So it's interesting. The argument that you're opposing, that was, airtight, watertight, in a vacuum,
Yeah.
was pretty simple. The rigor with which WotC has introduced, or the threshold for which WotC has introduced, like, hey, we need to do something about this format, in all the published materials and all that we can draw from is pretty simple. One is that 55% or greater is too high a win rate for a deck in the metagame. 55% is the trigger. It's going to set off an alarm to just be like, hey, we should take a look at this deck because it's winning at 55%. They have access to this data specifically through the Magic Online leagues and challenges. So it's just extremely easy for them to do the Duress Crew PDAT, except for times infinity because of a huge, much bigger volume of matches. And then, obviously, maybe one or two data scientists working on it. I don't think it's like a squad, but I do think it is credentialed professionals.
I think the pre-modern pool has people that could be like reasonably qualified to conduct such analyses. Like with computer scientists and statisticians and like
combinatorial mathematicians.
Like Rick Shea works for MathWorks. Like he is qualified to do this, but they're like paid to do it.
Presumptively, fired. Like we don't know exactly, right? Maybe it is just a guy who's just chat GPTing everything, but regardless, 55% is above the threshold of rigor, and then multiplied by the idea that if a single card is present amongst multiple archetypes that have over a 55% win rate, an example being like Duress,
which is the strongest case.
Which is like super flexible, awesome, super power broken card. We should ban that card. And so it's a difficult to port this analog to pre-modern, but the simplest argument for this is just like, okay, like let's just assume that pre-modern has a lot of these sort of for fun gamers, recreational players who, as a result of one or two things, one being not particularly engaged in pre-modern and just like being like, okay, I'm just going to play Burn. Which you see from the PDAT, because Burn, the sample of Burn is double the next most popular deck, which happens to be Goblins, right? So Burn has over 1,000 matches entered in to the data, and then Goblins has 570. And then together, those 1,500 like matches of red decks, the next most popular ones then become Mono Blue Dreadnought, Replenish, and Terradon. So, so luckily for us, the PDAT has data filtering. So you can start by saying like, okay, there are 16 archetypes represented in the PDAT. Those comprise at least 2% of the metagame each. So that can be obviously anywhere from a minimum of 30%, 32% to a maximum of course, 100%. We don't actually know offhand what data is being visualized by this grid.
It could be approximated using MTG top 8 meta shares. So we could extrapolate it by ratios and just assume that everything that goes into the PDAP is present in like similar ratios to MTG top 8.
Yeah, or we can just ask whoever's got access to the back end and some free time. But regardless,
the data comes from all sorts of sources. But I do think it is worth noting that there are like the reserved list presentation is probably a function of GDP per capita, which is like a gross thing to say out loud, but I think it's true. So this should be acknowledged that like this is a factor.
Yeah. I would bring that in. I think that there's I think that this is like one of those things where you're like, it's just going to trim a little off the middle, right? Because basically you're going to have the most obvious argument is that the most people who are super into the idea of playing pre-modern competitively are going to be less likely to face those barriers. But of course, the lack of opportunity to be competitive if you simply can't afford reserve list staples, or you're not friends or proxy friendly, whatever, is going to, or don't have access to Magic Online, various reasons. Like all of those things are going to, say that, like, there's probably some pre-modern genius making minimum wage right now, and we just don't have access to their brilliance. But this is all to say, we have these 16 decks. We can just be like, whatever, they're somewhere between, like 40 and 70% of the metagame. And what we can do with this data is that we can filter the win rate to be just these 16 decks against each other. And so if we keep in decks that are not in the top 16 most popular, we have in order: Replenish, Tide Control, Terradon, and Mono Blue Dreadnought. Replenish at 59.4% win rate, and Mono Blue Dreadnought at 58.7% win rate. This
is filtered. This is just within the popular metagame.
No, this is everything. This is everything. Yeah, this is this is total win rate. So this is where you start.
Yeah. So total win rate. Those are. Well, you said
no. That's why I was saying it's the opposite of what you were saying before. The filter makes it 60. It reduces. It just cuts out everything that has less than 2% from the data. So this is with basically the pet decks and the brews. Like this is with decks that are like so basically the least popular deck on this list is Blue Black Psychotog, right? So if your deck gets played at lower than the rate of Blue Black Psychotog, I'm talking Storm, Mono Blue Storm, Iggy Pop type stuff. Dead Guy Ale isn't over 2%. Blue Green Enchantress. I'm just naming combo decks. I'm trying to think of like just a mid-range deck that has less than 2%.
Contested Cliffs mid-range.
Green Red Beatdown is actually a great example, right? That's like a deck that people play but just don't. But it's not here. 10 Land Stompy, White Weenie, the Solution,
Tide.
So all those decks are not in the graph. So I mean, Survival Madness is on here because certain people have put in hundreds of matches in alone. But that for the like we're a little off the rails here talking about the nature of the P data. I want to get back to. We have the total win rate, which is basically says Replenish, Tide Control, Terradon, and Mono Blue Dreadnought are on top, and they're on top. They're all over 55%. If we include all decks that are over 55%, it actually goes all the way down from all the way down to Survival Madness. So 8 decks with over 55% win rate. That's Replenish, Tide Control, Terradon, and Mono Blue Dreadnought, Elves, Red Green Oath Ponza, Survival Rock, and Survival Madness. So if you are a Billy type person, you could basically say, listen, there are 5 decks that have over 58% win rate. 3 of them have tied. The top 4 have 3 of the top 4 have tied. The top 2 have tied. Tied is more than above the rigor of the WotC thing. And so so first I had a hypothetical argument. I was like, well, what do you think would happen if you just eliminated the recreational gamers from this data set? And I thought that this was just a hypothetical, but the PDAT allows us to filter for the top 16 decks against just the top 16 decks. So it removes all of that Iggy Pop zone and below type decks. Now, some of those decks might have 59 or 65% win rates that we don't know about. Like somebody might have just like a phenomenal, whatever, but that's beside the point. Like most of these decks are going to be the 4 fun gamer decks. Once you do that, something really interesting happens. Most decks fall off on their win rate by an average about 3%. So basically you would say that if you just controlled for top 16 decks and we could probably get an exact number, but if you just kind of look, everything drops from like 59ish to 56, 50, 54ish. So you're like, okay, this is actually, I actually love that this happens to be 3%. 3% is the amount that John McCain lost in the 2008 election. 3% is the edge that users of the arena data tracking thing. I forget what it's called now.
I know what you're talking about, but I don't.
Yeah, so if you draft on Arena, 17 lands.
Mm-hmm.
Users of 17 lands have a 3% edge on non-users of 17 lands, right? Or just in general. So they have a 53% win rate. So 3% is actually a really useful number for if you just wanted to throw a number out there. Is like how much edge a invested player has on average than a non-invested player. It'd be about 3%.
Yeah.
So most things drop off by 3%, but Tide Control and Mono Blue Dreadnought go from their roughly 59% down to 52.8% for Mono Blue Dreadnought and 53.4% Dreadnought for Tide Control.
I want to rigorize our vocabulary here, or rather, just make sure we're looking at the same damn thing.
Yeah, sure.
I'm sorting by win rate. I'm looking at the PDAP right now.
Well, you can't sort. Remember, when you sort by win rate, you don't actually see it sorted by the new win rate. Yeah.
I'm just looking. All right, so I got total win rate, replenish, 59.4. Right?
Yeah.
Filtered win rate. So now this is just the top 16, 17 decks, and everything drops down a little bit.
That's correct.
Okay, so I actually feel more invested in my argument than I was when I was crying on Discord this morning. So no matter where you're at, this is not just like in a winners metagame. This is against everybody. So it's not like, oh, there's something bubbling under the surface. Oh, you're not accounting for this dude who like plays, 8 blasts main. Like, no, this is against everybody, format wide, from 8 blast main deck players to the sweatiest tryhard in Worcester, like 3 of the top 4. This is the most inclusive data set. This is no cherry picking, nothing. Everybody who's playing this game replenish 59.4.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And then filtered. So now we're in like, okay, so what's popular, what's covered, what people play in leagues when they're like really trying to win, or what people look to.
Not necessarily. This is just 2% or above popularity.
Yes.
And so that doesn't necessarily mean So basically, for example, right? There are some decks on here with truly abysmal
The Rock.
Black-white control, actually, right? So the Rock is horrible. Don't get me wrong. The Rock is the second worst, but that's like a thing of just like if you were a quote unquote try hard, you just wouldn't play the deck. Like that deck happens to be popular amongst the Rock, Goblins, Landstill, and Black-white control. And Burn. These are all the decks that are just like, oh, I'm new to pre-modern. What should I play? And they're like, you should play the Rock. And it's just like, that is horrible advice. Like, do you want your friend to quit pre-modern?
I have appreciation for some of these decks for like historical reasons, but not for sweaty reasons.
Yeah. It depends on your friend, right? It's just like, does your friend enjoy not winning lots of matches of Magic? Yeah. It's just like, can they still enjoy this? But that's regardless. So, that is just to say that just because you flipped over to filtered win rate does not mean that you cut out like all of the recreational or less committed players. However, it gets you a lot closer to the WotC type data, which includes people who play Jund in Modern and have just been playing Jund in Modern since whatever. Like there are in the WotC data. There's certainly going to be, like, just because of the frequency and the volume and the stakes involved. There's certainly going to be more sweaty tryhard decks involved. But that does not mean that there aren't people out there who are just like I used to be a Niv Mizzet Reborn player, and it was good like maybe good for a very small period of time, and it was mostly bad the rest of the time, right? And so me and my Discord full of compatriots were polluting WotC data, bringing everybody's win rates up by insisting on playing Niv Mizzet Reborn. So a similar thing can happen in the WotC data. But I want to, very quickly just go down the top 8 and just say what happens.
Total win rate or filtered win rate? I'm
going to say the change, right? So replenish goes from 59.4 to 56.3. Tide control goes to 59.1 down to 53.4. Yep. TGED goes from 58.9 to 55.4. Mono Blue Dreadnought goes from 58.7 to 52.8. Elves goes from 58.5 to 55.8. Red Green Oath Ponza goes from 57.4 to 54.5. And Survival Rock goes from 57% down to 54.4%. Everything below these top 7 decks is tends to drop below 50% or hovering around that when you filter. And so so this is like one, all data, so that includes basically if the first number is higher because the top 7 decks are going to be much better against the trash, the tier 3 and below than than your average deck, and then when you filter those out, you're basically saying like, okay, how are the top 7 decks against the top 16 decks? So we have that as our basis. And the thing that you would observe is that Tide Control and Dreadnought both fall from hovering around 59 to hovering around 53. And that's a huge fall off that doesn't happen with the rest of the top 7.
I have almost no feelings about filtered win rate. I have very strong feelings about total win rate. I have almost no feelings about filtered win rate because this is it doesn't controlling for popularity. I don't think offers enough data yet to say anything that smart, because I think that there's decks that are like exist but aren't that popular. Dead Gaia. Everybody knows. Even though it's a 1% deck, everybody knows to like be cognizant of like what 2 cards you're going to discard, or I don't know, like pit rack decks are like below 1%. Like everybody knows to like line shit up. Excuse me, line stuff up. So that you maybe you overvalue like an Exalted Angel in hand because it might be nice to put it into play with a Tempting Worm, or to split like what's in play versus what's in hand, so you don't get blown out by Cabal Therapy. I don't know. I don't think I really have much to say about the delta between total and filtered. There exists a more compacted. Let's see what happens to the Rock. Total win rate.
The rock just
I don't.
No, Black White Control is actually the insane one. Black White Control has 44.5% total win rate. It goes down to 36.7%. This is the biggest fall off out of any deck. So Black White, if you want to talk about decks that are only good against bad decks, Black White Control is like a really great example because one, it doesn't even start with a good win rate. But if you just filter it for within the top 16, it 36.7% is just laughable. Yeah,
that's I once heard an utterance by a player that said, actually, never mind. This
is fine. This is fine. Some people think that this was the best control deck in the format. I might have said that at some point in time. On my very tier list, I actually should just delete Black White Control from the entire thing because I was just on the Black White Control train. I was just like, yeah, this deck's pretty good. Like, it's better than the Rock. It's not better than the Rock. Like,
I think that's pretty bad.
It's not better than the Rock. It's not better than Landstill. It's actually just bad. Like, it's not good against anything.
Well, no, I don't think it's bad. I mean, it's bad by win rate. I'm glad it exists. I'm glad that it's very, very cheap in modern modern printing.
If
it's good for the format.
If the only deck in the format was like Landstill and Dreadnought and that's it. Then black white control. The metagame would have to work really hard to become a black white control metagame. But anyways, I'm going to address.
You should play it in New England.
Yeah,
it's just infested here. Just clever boys. Ugh.
I mean, you might get the wrong clever boys though, because we're talking 15% against replenish and 30%, 27.3% against high control. But this, to address your point of why does this matter? The reason why it matters is just to make our grid, the grid that we have access to, closer to like the hypothetical contemporary format grid where there is a rebalancing of decks such that there's not such a huge impact of for fun gamers. Now, we can't actually say that that's the case. It could be the case that whatever decks aren't represented are below 2% representation. We can't necessarily say. I mean, there are things that we could draw on. We don't have them in front of us, but like generally speaking, at every Pro Tour that's in Modern, the like Rogue or other category hovers somewhere between like 20 to 30%. And that's like at RCs and Pro Tours and whatever. So for Modern or whatever. And then of course Legacy, there's no data that we have access to. There's people who are working pretty hard on the challenge data for Legacy and Vintage, so we could take a look at what they are. But like first we would have to figure out if pre-modern necessarily has a lower population of people playing the decks that are classified as other in a metagame breakdown.
I don't think that filtered win rate can really do anything other than just state popularity versus dispopularity. And I don't think that we can ascribe any other variable than that with a high degree of confidence yet. It could be interesting to see, like
I think that if the effect on a deck like Replenish is 3% and the effect on a deck like Dreadnought is 6%, that's pretty meaningful, like, to me, because what that tells me is that Replenish holds its edge against the most popular decks, whereas a lot of Mono Blue Dreadnought's edge is coming from that category of deck that's below the 16 most popular.
But at 17 and up popularity, 17th rank and below popularity, I don't think we can make any hypothesis or any reasonable hypothesis that like for fun gamers are, like, let's say you got some homie you went to school with, maybe like played in like at like your Magic Club and at university. And they say like, hey, I heard you've been active in the pre-modern scene. What should I play? Would you recommend one of these top 16 decks, or would you recommend something else?
Yeah, I would recommend that they play like one, like I would recommend that they play one of the top 8 decks that is the closest to something that they're interested in.
So we have like low enfranchisement or low PM experience players. I mean, this format is generally word of mouth. I think that's a reasonable thing to say. And like that's why it's sweet. Yeah, it's like somebody. Like
you're making the argument that an amount of for fun gamers exist in playing the top 16 decks in addition to the amount of for fun for gamers, like whatever.
Yeah, and in my case, I didn't start getting creative until I'd been in the format for like a year.
Sure, but this let's just say that we take the pilot out of the data and we just say like this is how the decks perform on average, right?
Yep.
There is not a like 1-to-1 correlation of deck popularity and win rate. However, there is likely some correlation, and then like yeah. Basically, I actually kind of get like this is actually a very interesting thing because I could be convinced to agree with you, which is just to say that a deck's power, you could just basically say a deck's power level is not strongly enough related to its popularity for filtered win rate to matter.
I have almost no feelings about filtered win rate, really, except for that I would, if I were, that's that whole like, you got to make it to the top 8 before you can start, using your tech for the top 8. Like I would play 8 blasts main if I could, because I want to punish that horrible class of player that plays blue. But I can't get to the top 8 if I have those 8 blasts. Like I have to play against, 3 deuce and red green zoo and all that stuff. Good honest Magic players who I want to cultivate like a play environment where they're welcome. So I think if we're going to, I think we kind of need to split this to follow Roger's rules. Or no, it's Robert's rules of order. I think this is like a strong case for like splitting the issue of like styling on Billy for crying about Tide. That's the first issue, and then the second issue is like, what does total versus filtered win rate really tell us?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I don't really. I'm indifferent to the Tide situation. I thought it was just interesting to examine under like it would be interesting to say like what happened if we applied pre-modern if we applied WotC's ban philosophies to pre-modern, and if you could make a case basically saying like if you can make a win rate based case. And
yeah, I mean the case is like, okay, so total win rate sorted by total win rate, replenish Tide, Terradon, Dreadnought, Elves, Oath Ponza, Survival Rock, Survival Madness, and that's it. Yeah, so to me, if we're going to apply a WotC standard, so I'm not advocating this, I am hypothesizing what the WotC standard would be. I see Mox Diamond, I see Survival, I see Tide.
I mean, Mox Diamond's ridiculous to put in there, right? If only one deck is playing it, and that deck's total win rate is
Red Green Oath Ponza.
Oh, Oath Ponza? Mox Diamond is so bad in Ponza. I get it. The deck is all 2-drop, so it needs to do something. The deck literally can't do anything on turn 1 without Mox Diamond, so totally understandable there. But the deck also has just the worst card economy of any deck like in the format, and it's just like it's just mulliganing to 6 so that it can play at the same time as the other decks in it. It's just kind of like that just kills me. But
I mean, it's a 57% deck, and which is like really dang good, and it plays for Mox Diamond. I would like to congratulate you for your recent strong finish, which challenged that paradigm. I think that was great, and I'm happy for you, particularly with the inclusion of Smokestack. That was really cool.
Yeah, I mean, well, you can't play Mox Diamond. You can't play 4 Mox Diamond in your Smokestack deck. I mean, that's neither here nor there. I get what you're saying. I forgot when you said Mox Diamond like stands out to you. I forgot that it was a thing. I find the Mox Diamond argument to be like one of the most polarized around trying players and non-trying players, or like whatever you want to say, like for fun gamers and non-for fun gamers, because it's just like I think that non-for fun gamers like don't really get crushed by Mox Diamond. Like like if you basically consider what Mox Diamond is doing for those decks, Red Green Oath Ponza, like maybe it's unplayable without Mox Diamond. Maybe it's slightly worse, but like Again, just it giving up a card is like such an exploitable thing, and of course the fact that it can be removed. Like I count myself amongst those who are just like, don't bother disenchanting Mox Diamonds. Like it's just like trading your not air for air, and I've kind of moved my needle on that of just like, wait, actually, if you just like disenchant the Mox Diamonds, like these decks just get completely crushed. And then the fact that they randomly lose their Call to Herd tokens at the same time to like powder kegs, or, you know, it used to be we brought meltdowns in against Parfait, and that was just like ridiculous because you got the Scroll Rack and the Mox Diamond. So all those things aside, like taking a mulligan so that you can be on the play or the super play is good, but it's not like, it is not affecting the outcome of the game. It might affect the outcome of the game such that like you get to have on the play advantage and the super on the play advantage in one direction. That's probably worth, I would just say 3%, just number off the top of my head. And then you just lose probably 2 of that 3% when you just like draw the second Mox Diamond, or it gets blown up in your face, or you can't keep a hand because it has 2 lands and a Mox Diamond, and you just like don't know if you're going to draw the third land. So it's just like a 6-card hand, and then you mulligan, and then your 6-card hand has 2 lands and a Mox Diamond. And you're like, well, I guess I'm happy to bottom this Mox Diamond now. But anyways, that's all besides the point. The point is that it really stands out to you that Tide and Survival and Terradon and Red Green Oath Ponza are definitely vibey similar decks of just kind of like, you know, they're just like Wasteland Port decks, and then like the other thing that they do like is just different on top of that. And I functionally agree with you that the emergent trend is to build around Survival of the Fittest or Parallax Tide. Not that Dreadnought is built around Parallax Tide. I mean, I guess you could just like, Dreadnought is just Dreadnought, and like you can build a bunch of Dreadnought decks. It just so happens that Mono Blue Dreadnought is like just the one. I guess, I mean, I don't know. It'd be weird to make an assumption that like Terradon and Ponza Oath players are basically like Dreadnought players versus blue-black, blue-white Dreadnought players, but who knows?
I think the decks do some pretty different things. I don't know. To backtrack a little bit, I think Mox Diamond is like an incredibly easy card to critique. And it's the play, super play, going down a card conversation is all very, it's just like one step further than like saying like just like reading the card. Like you read the card and you made like the most basic analysis. I think Mox Diamond is among the best cards in pre-modern.
Well, I'll just say this is like the bell curve thing where it's like, I think that a lot of the critique for Mox Diamond is coming from like not reading the card. Like, I think a lot of the critique is coming from like, oh, like you just get this mana source in your deck and it makes all 5 colors, and like there's no downside to it, and you just get to crush your opponent because you had Mox Diamond. And it's just like, that's just not the reality of the reality of the game. And don't get me wrong, like if a card's game in hand win rate was 3% above replacement, that might be cause for concern. But like Mox Diamond in your opening hand is probably worse than Phyrexian Dreadnought in your opening hand. And then the other thing is
that I think that's like I think that's a bad comparison, because Phyrexian Dreadnought is like the only win condition, whereas Mox Diamond can be like readily replaced by this other category of card that you're playing like 20 to 28 of. So like consider win rate of Dreadnought, which never draws Dreadnought, and consider win rate of Terradon or with Ponza, which never draws Mox Diamond.
Yeah, I mean, it's Dreadnought. It's just Dreadnought that never draws Dreadnought in its opening hand, right? So like the expectation would be like you have a opening hand win rate of like a card like Mox Diamond, which is like super good in your opening hand and super bad late, right? So Mox Diamond would need to have like basically like a 59% opening hand win rate to make up for its like 47% or 44% or 40% win rate when drawn later than your opening hand. Like we don't have those numbers. Wizards would have those numbers, right?
I was working on that, dog. I was ripping through every YouTube video I could find, and it was comparing. I was trying to make an approximation of how many the whole like 2, 3, 4 Sylvan library.
Yeah.
And 2, 3, 4 Mox Diamond arguments.
Yeah.
And I was ripping through like high key all of Fran's videos, just being like, what's the opening hand? Throttle forward a little bit. And I did not get very good data because Fran just wins all the time.
Yeah, so his win rate is too. Like, you would need 10 France. And like,
yeah, exactly, because the guy just doesn't lose. Like, well, it actually doesn't matter if you have it in your hand or not because you just keep winning. So
well,
I can't assess the counter hypothesis.
Yeah. So. No, you literally would have to just kind of like be like, okay, well, what if it was like another card, or you have to do qualitative. You have to just be like, did this impact the game? Yeah.
Well, no, I actually, it's maybe. It's you don't make those assessments. You make like, was it in opening hand? Because
you couldn't. But you would have to go to a qualitative like place. So like, one of the things that I did with the deep dive in Fran's video was just like, there was a time where people thought sleight of hand was a better card than portent, and Fran was amongst those people, right? And I was just like, just look at this video and just be like, how many times would looking at 3 cards and having the choice to shuffle be better than getting one of the top 2 cards right now? And I went and I did it, and it was just kind of like...
No, I don't care. I don't care. I do not care about that assessment. I don't want to conduct that assessment. It's bad. It's incredibly hard to measure. The only plausible assessment you can make is, was it present or absent? Was it in your opening hand or not?
No, if that's not true, because you can control you're able to control if you know that exact card when you draw it is the card that you would otherwise have. Like, if you know that you're going to replace exactly 4 slots in your deck for sleight of hand for portent, then you can just be like, okay, well, I would have drawn portent here, and then you can make a pretty reasonable guess as to like what the outcome of the game. So even if you still won with sleight of hand, like, you can just be like, this card's more powerful, or like, this card's more useful.
I think that is like, I think that is tempting, but I don't think that's good data science.
I mean, okay, let's just make it quite simple, right? I just have a deck, and it has 4 shocks or 4 lightning bolts, right?
Sure.
Like, we obviously don't have to do the data on what card's better, because one is strictly better, right?
Yep.
But the fact that the amount of time it would take for you, the amount of sample and time it would make for you to actually find out that shock is a worse card, like, under just the rigor of did you draw it and did you win the game, is just like substantially more than like what you could say by just saying like, okay, well, why don't you just make the population every single time you draw this card, and then put yourself in like, this is just counterfactuals, right? Just put yourself in the universe where you would have drawn or cast lightning bolt and just been like, A or B, or it doesn't matter. Like, I don't see the flaw.
You play differently with the knowledge that the card is in your deck or absent from your deck. Were you playing Legacy in anywhere between like 2012 and maybe 2017? Okay. Are you familiar with Legacy Storm?
Which one?
Ad Nauseam Tendrils or the Epic Store?
Yeah.
Either of those.
Yep.
Okay. So you play differently. So we're testing. Okay. Do I want main deck Empty the Warrants, or do I want main deck Tendrils of Agony, or do I want both? We know that we want Ad Nauseam in our deck because it's like, the deck's named after it. It's really, really strong card. And there's a cost to playing either, like you do the blackjack game where you're losing life. But the thing is, you choose different lines. For example, like turn 1, making 12 goblins is a lot better than turn 1 tendrils for 12. One has a pretty good chance of winning. And the other is like, what are you doing, dude? So the knowledge that the card is in your deck affects the decisions you make during the game. So I think that in the case of like shock versus lightning bolt, that's like abundantly clear. Like, I don't know, maybe there's some like really, super corner case card of like, if a card would deal 3 or more damage, like prevent that damage, blah, 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 like weird stuff like that, like StarCraft math. But I think that we cannot make those judgments because you could just straight up be wrong.
No, you obviously could, but the effect of which you're confounding like principle between two, like that you've used the most harsh counterexample, which is just like a black card and a red card that don't do anything similar at all. Whereas like the opposite end of that spectrum is shock and lightning bolt, and like portent and sleight of hand is much, much, much closer to shock and lightning bolt than it is to. And
I completely agree.
So I would just basically say like I would not lose the picture over whether or not it is like don't let perfect be the enemy of good, right? Whereas like the analysis that you need something to decide, and like you don't have to say like, listen, I've got the data, right? Like you don't have to like I didn't present Fran with a spreadsheet in order to say like this is a open and shut case of portent better than sleight of hand. Like we already know that like you can fill an imaginary column in your head where you just needed one of the top 2 cards right away, and the other imaginary column in your head where you needed one of 3 and you could wait a turn, right? You could basically conduct that argument with yourself, and like you could conduct that argument with other people too, just being like, I want to like portent's better at finding your second land drop, sleight of hand is better at finding your Dreadnought Stifle on the turn where you have to Dreadnought Stifle, and then people just kind of blab about that and they get nowhere. And and my ability to just be like, okay, well, we just have video of people playing portent and people casting sleight of hand, and we can just go and we can look and just be like, most of the time that people cast sleight of hand, if they cast portent, the outcome would have been better for them. And that's not to say that like portent is better. Like that's not to say that sleight of hand somehow lost its ability to win games. And that's not to say that sleight of hand's when drawn win rate is 50 whatever, and portent's when drawn win rate is 50 whatever. It just means what it means. It just means that if I drew portent, it would have been better, like here, and here. And the extent to which that's misleading, I don't think I'm hearing from you like what that is.
I think we're actually kind of arguing 2 different things, where I am like arguing a case for like where quantitative analysis is valuable, and you are arguing for like a framework for where qualitative that's only in the absence of quantitative.
Yeah, that's why I said qualitative. That's why I said I was trying to reframe our thing. It's just like, okay, we no longer have access to this world where like the Mox Diamond in T-Geds, or the Mox Diamond or Sylvan Library in T-Geds question, right? Like this is 100% where vibes come into play, like 3 versus 4, 2 versus 3, like those kinds of questions. We can't answer those with quantitative analysis because it's just not possible. Like we just can't.
Yeah, absolutely. I can. I can rip through every YouTube video and see every opening hand. I say, does it have Mox Diamond or not? And then I look at the win percentage. And then I look,
right, but the fact that you couldn't draw a conclusion from this is my point. I'm not saying that you literally can't. I'm saying that
I mean, I didn't have the time to do it because Fran doesn't lose enough, so it doesn't.
No, but that's my point. Is that's you're like, okay. If you're trying to remove
1,000 games of Fran, I could come to a conclusion.
Yeah. That's the thing. It's like it's too difficult to remove variables, right?
I did. Well, here's the case with like the like tools like the PDAP is that like we as like analysis tools grow more sophisticated. So for example, there's this dude in Duress Crew, Aiden, and he's showing us like visual recognition like projects he's doing for graduate studies. like, let's say he is able to take like YouTube screenshots of like the beginning of game and like test for, and he creates some crawler to like rip through YouTube and sees which game it is. And like, it's really not that crazy that in like 2 years from now, we'll have like an actual like MTGO watcher or bot that is going to spit us out win rates for cards based on like opening. And like when I was playing Arena during COVID summer, like I had an analysis tool that said like win rate for opening hand.
Arena provides a file with a game log of every single card you drew and every action in the game. So that's much easier to perform a data analysis on. But like my point is that what you ran into, right, was just like a very difficult like situation to draw any conclusions from your quantitative analysis, because like you said, Fran wins too much, and in order for you to extract a card's when drawn win rate from that data, like you would just need more matches than Fran has played in his lifetime with those cards, more matches than multiple people have played in their lifetimes in pre-modern with those cards. And then at a certain point, you actually go back to the problem that you stated was the problem between Empty the Warrens and Tendrils of Agony. Is just like, okay, in order for this to work, right, you would have to take the same, your data can be solid, right? Your data can basically say that maybe the fourth copy of Mox Diamond has 2% less win rate or 2% more win rate than the third copy of Mox Diamond or whatever. Once you get to that point, you've conducted your review, your visual recognition, whatever, 100,000 Magic Online matches. Then you're like, okay, I want to switch Mox Diamond for Birds of Paradise. And then you have to go and play 10,000 matches of Birds of Paradise to see if Birds of Paradise is better than Mox Diamond. Like, because the only conclusion that you can draw was that this just had X game in hand win rate, but you don't know what that is above replacement. Especially for the pronounced effect for a card like Tendrils of Agony or Empty the Warrens would be gigantic, right? Because you'd just be like, okay, if I change that card in my deck, I have to change everything in my deck. So like, this just goes back to the Andrew Ellenbogen tweet that was just like the being successful at testing or brewing or playing Magic is making conclusions from not enough data. Like you have to have to exercise qualitative analysis. In fact, the amount of extreme that you would have to get fully quantitative is so huge that like that's like the horizon, right? That's like outer space, right? That's in Pluto, and we're closer.
You can get closer than you think. So this is almost like we're pretty. This reminds me of like nature versus nurture, blah 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 conversation about like qualitative versus quantitative,
right?
Or that like classical painting of like Plato and Aristotle, like with their hands facing different directions. There's some mural of that at City College. I think this is just like we're just advocating for like which methods we stand and which are achievable, and like I think I'm just like more content to put like a YouTube video essay in the background and like watch like crunch numbers and like mess around in Excel, and I think that's like where I like to be happier. And
right. But at the end of the day, right? Okay, so this is a prioritization question, which is just like, do you actually enjoy that more than playing matches of Magic? Because it's possible that you do.
Definitely.
Yeah,
I spent way more time on Excel than I do playing Magic.
So this is actually because we were joking. Our Airbnb joke at last year's LobsterCon was just like rank the following: winning tournaments, making deck picks, gaslighting your friends. Let's rank these.
And Magic's a multimodal hobby. Like we both acknowledge that like creating content is like part of this value, and then analysis and community building and charity work and chilling with the homies, and like
Yeah,
I play
absolutely.
AAA because like some of it is like gloating, like ha, I took your whatever your Savannah Alliance and draw on it, now it's mine. Like it's multimodal
Yeah,
and like
yeah.
what
So
makes you happy.
let's not completely lose the plot here. So
Okay, yeah, okay. Let's return to the original
we
point.
we we actually it's good because in the past 20 minutes or so we established where we're coming from, and I think that
Sure.
it's useful to basically bring in the interpretation of what we're seeing and what
Yeah.
like I admit that there are confounding factors to the difference between total win rate and filtered win rate.
And I freely admit that approximations and and vibes are of value in that like qualitative analysis is beyond our sorry quantitative analysis is beyond our computational bandwidth, and qualitative has value, and
Right.
we should use it and learn from it.
Right. Well, I mean, it is the purpose of this discussion, which is basically to say that we have access to a very, 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 very small glimpse of to like what the format looks like.
Yep.
From like we can zoom out from a super telephoto lens to like just a telephoto lens. But that's the thing is like, let me just give a gentler example, right? Terradon to me was a deck that only beats decks that suck. Because when I play against the deck that play the deck against decks that don't suck, my sample size of 1 is like, okay, like I can't beat this entire class of decks, which is survival of the fittest decks. I can't even beat the survival of the fittest decks that suck, right? And so I'm just like sitting there and I'm just kind of like, okay, like I'm never gonna play this stupid deck. Like it's just so it has no control over how good it is if your opponent is doing XYZ. But I spent the afternoon and I was just like clicking around and I'm just like, okay, well, let's just see how Terradon does in a metagame that's only like this deck, and this deck. And, it was actually very convincing to me that Terradon as a deck is 55% against just the top 16 most popular decks. That Replenish is 56% against the top 16 most popular. The fact that Tide Control and Dreadnought lose so much of their edge. Now maybe pub stomping is incorrect because your counter argument is just like there's pubbers everywhere. Like the pubbers are up and down the sheet. Like they're playing as much Dreadnought as they are playing a 2% sample of 3 Zoo and Mono Blue Storm. So I think that's a super reasonable counter argument. But the fact that I can filter these win rates, also helps with regards to like evaluating something like Elves, which is just kind of like, okay, well, Elves is like really simple. You can just kind of click around and just be like, okay, this deck, is just really excellent when you take out the red data, whereas like Mono Blue Dreadnought is like really horrible when you take out the red data. And then so you can just like do something which is not a smart thing to do, to just be like, okay, my thesis is I'm going to win this tournament if I never get paired against Burner Goblins, because according to the data, Burner Goblins are the highest recommended decks, or this is the highest play rate decks.
Can we assess this point of Terradon only beats bad decks?
Sure, I'm gonna let Michael J join the conversation an hour in.
Okay,
Mike.
Hello, sir.
Hey, I have until about 1:30.
All right. Well, it's 104, and to catch you up, I'm going to share my screen, and I need you to. And I might actually have to. I might actually have to go quite soon. I'm working out. Yeah, so I might have like 20 minutes.
All right.
I'm gonna share my screen. We discovered something here, which is this button right here, right? You see this? Are you able to see this, Mike?
Yeah.
Okay, so to catch you up, the reason why we're having this podcast is basically Billy was just like, these are the top 3 decks, or top 4 decks: Replenish, Tide Control, Terradon, Mono Blue Dreadnought. They are 59 through 58.7% win rate. 3 of them contain Parallax Tide. If you're Wizards of the Coast and you had this
2.5 contain Parallax Tide.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, whatever. If you're Wizards and you're looking at this data, I mean, look, honestly, if we just remove the Tide from Mono Blue Dreadnought deck, this number probably goes up, right? But notwithstanding, if you're Wizards and you're looking at this data, you just be like, okay, you should just ban Tide, right? Because they just banned Luris, and Luris was in like multiple 55% and above decks. And I said, that's very interesting. I just noticed that there's a little button here that says filtered win rate. What this button does is, instead of saying this is how good Replenish is in win rate against every single deck played in pre-modern, it instead makes it so Replenish is this good against these 16 decks, which represent, we're not sure, but at least 2% each of pre-modern. So a minimum of 32%.
That's the definition. That's the definition, is 2% play rate.
Yeah, a minimum of 2% and a maximum of God knows what. So this is saying like the most popular, somewhere between, 40 or 70% of decks, if you're just kind of going to just like guess, or just, if you're just going to make an educated guess. So what happens when we jump between these two numbers? We have Replenish going from 59 to 56, Tide Control going from 59 to 53. So much bigger drop. Terradon just dropping by a little. Mono Blue Dreadnought, again, dropping by a bunch.
Drops by a ton.
Goes from 58
like a stone. It drops.
Yeah, exactly. Goes from 58% to 52%.
Replenish drops, yeah.
Well, Replenish drops like 3%, right? So most things drop 3%. Generally speaking, it looks like the edge of a top 16 play rate deck over a next top 16 play rate, a top 8 play rate deck, and a lower than top 8 against everything versus top 8 against top 16. The drop is about 3%, with the exception of Tide Control Mono Blue Dreadnought, which drops 6%. And then if you jump down here, kind of entertaining, Black-White Control starts at 44% against the field. Against just the top 60 most popular decks, it is 36.7%. So
wow.
Yeah.
Don't even say Black-White.
So I've been having a ton of fun with this. You can also do total win rate, and then you can just be like, oh, let's look at Mono Blue Dreadnought, and let's just take out Goblins and Burn and filter it. Mono Blue Dreadnought is a 45% deck if you never played against red.
Basically, Mono Blue Dreadnought beats up on basic mountains, and then it's actually
the rock against the
pretty
field.
Mid deck otherwise.
So the last hour of the podcast has been Billy and me basically going back and forth about
toggling.
Just the implications of the toggling. So Billy is basically saying like, you can. I am indifferent to what happens when you toggle, because one, any conclusion that you can draw about what the 17th and below play rate decks as a population is purely speculative. So if you're me, I'm basically speculating that if you're playing any deck that isn't listed here, you're more likely to, by a significant amount, to be a recreational or for fun type pre-modern player, and
like I am, like a Vorthos, basically.
And as a result, by filtering and unfiltering, you can basically distill the amount of pub stomping that a deck is doing. Of course, the counter argument to that is just like, you can't say that there's this many recreational gamers in these decks and below, and this many recreational gamers in these decks and above, because like plenty of people who are recreational also play Dreadnought, right? They also play Elves or Survival Madness or whatever. So like the filtering is just random. It just happens that these are the top 16 most popular decks, but the population of Vibers in playing the top 16 popular decks and the 17th and below the decks is like, you can't say that the number is one or the other.
What about like Terradon with Survival of the Fittest, or 23andMe, the most important decks in the format? Best Attack, which just
the three most important decks in the format.
3 most important decks: Best Attack, 23andMe, and Survival Terradon with one Werebear.
All right, I want to raise 2 topics which I'd like to address. All right. One is, I want to play a game. Michael and Lanny, we're going to hypothesize Terrageddon? Is it the claim? We're going to make hypothesis about does Terrageddon, is it only good against bad decks? So what is your is this? Do you agree or disagree? Terrageddon is only good against bad decks.
I disagree.
Before today, I would.
Don't click anything yet. Don't click anything yet. No, we don't know yet. I'm. This is
Before today, right? Before I saw that Terrageddon was holding its edge against the top 16, where the mono blue decks were losing their edge against the top 16, I would have assumed the opposite would happen. I would assume that Terrageddon would go from 59 to 53, and that the mono blue decks would be the ones that cling on and stay at 56.
I think Terrageddon loses edge against better decks. I think Terrageddon annihilates bad decks, and I think against good decks it's worse.
I didn't play in a Duress Crew monthly or anything. I mean, I just know one of our best players, SWB, was playing Terrageddon. He was defeated by Rich Shea with Replenish to not make top 8 yesterday. He texted me. He was here this weekend. Yeah. And that's the matchup that Rich Shea as a Replenish player is most afraid of. I can tell you, we played Cube at Andy Levine's house, and then after that, all we did was rotate people playing Terrageddon against Mono Blue Tide. Like different people played on different sides. And I can just tell you, all that mattered was whether Andy Levine was piloting one of the two decks. Right? So if Andy Levine was piloting Terrageddon won. If Andy Levine was not piloting Terrageddon, Mono Blue won. Right?
Okay.
So
he has the most matchup knowledge. So
anybody but Andy Levine playing Terrageddon, like myself playing Terrageddon, Mono Blue won, regardless of who the Mono Blue player was, right? If Andy Levine was playing Terrageddon, he had a slight edge.
We know what you're saying. We know what you're saying.
Yeah, so like he didn't win all the games, right? But he was winning.
He knew how to win. Yeah. He knew how to win all the games. Yeah.
But like Andy Levine was just like, it was funny. Like I was backseat driving Mono Blue. Andy was backseat driving Terrageddon, like on this thing. And the thing that we found is Andy was 100% right. Like I had a game where I had 2 operating Weathered Wayfarers and went through all 4 of my Wastelands and 2 Rishodon ports and got annihilated. He's like, that card is irrelevant. And I was just like, how is this possible? I'm 8 cards ahead.
All right, Mike, let Billy finish his arc.
Thank you. Thank you for the courtesy, gentlemen. Okay, so select, filtered win rate with all decks selected, if you please. And then deselect the bad decks. So Rock, Black-White Control, Landstill, Goblins, Blue-Black Psychodogs, Sly.
Goblins is a bad deck.
Below 55%.
Wait.
Enchantress.
Oh yeah, like Goblins, just toggling Goblins here. It's, wait, hold on. T-Ged has edge against Goblins?
Yeah, for sure. I hate that matchup from Goblin side.
T-Ged against Goblins, 52.9%. Okay, no, there we go.
Dude,
Goblins
if you don't go super wide, they just have the
Are we taking out, you said you were taking out an Enchantress?
Yeah. So
Gat and I mean Burn. Are we taking out Burn? Is Burn a bad deck now? Okay.
All right. Rock is out. Black-White is out.
This is just
Landstill.
This is our thing. T gets 46% against a sampling of Elves, Mono Blue Dreadnought, Oathbonds of Replenish, Survival Rock, Terrageddon, and Tide Control. 46%.
Okay, so the hypothesis is supported. Terrageddon only beats bad decks. For the past 3 years, I've been just like stomping on bad players on bad decks.
All right, I'm going to take out Elves and add Goblins back in, and then Terrageddon becomes 51.1%.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So all this tells us, right, is that survival decks are good decks, and Terrageddon doesn't beat survival decks, right? But if you just take survival decks out of the sample, then Terrageddon looks awesome again.
Do you know what's awesome about this? I mean, I've only been on the podcast for 13 minutes, right? And most of that was just saying nonsense like I usually do. The thing that I like about this is we thought that we had some sort of mathematical certainty about stuff because of data.duresscrew.com, but it turns out all the decks are just 50%. Or maybe like 46 to 51%, and that's awesome.
Well, you are able to sculpt. I just discovered that you're able to sculpt around certain ideas that you might have by twisting the metagame outlook. Right. The fact
this is how corned beef hash came to light. Is I like just literally overlaid. I took elves, blue green madness, and what's the other survival deck? Black green
survival.
I go, wow, these are polarized. Can I fit these both in the same shell? Because they both attack different sides of the metagame, and they both have different metagame outlooks. And the only thing that they're both bad against is elves and goblins. Well, if I'm on Mox Diamond and Gemstone Mine and Birds of Paradise, I can play Engineered Plague. Matchup solved. Except that's not the case.
Yeah, you didn't solve the matchup at all. You still got crushed. I
just got annihilated by elves and goblins this past weekend, and almost went home because I was so burned.
Yeah, it is really. You just put your beers in the bag.
Going second, there's a lot of issues. I actually just want to say something real quick on the math. I just ran some real quick math. If you look at the filtered win rate, Mono Blue Dreadnought falls to like 52%, which is, let's call it 50%, right? 52%.
Yeah.
A lot more than
50%. Let's not call it 52 and 50 are a really big difference.
I mean, not in a single matchup perspective, but like if you look at it, like Sly's unfiltered win rate is about 52%. Its filtered win rate's like 49%. That's the same number. Right, that means it's
within. It is within the margin of error, which is not the same as saying it's the same number. No, it's
if you play 1,000 matches, Lanny, that's correct, but not if you play.
Stop saying it's the same number, because this is like the fact that the number changes is important. Like, even though we're talking huge margins of error, huge confidence interviews, the fact that the number changes is meaningful. You can't just say that, like, oh, it only changed by 3%. Like, the fact, like, the whole basis of this is, like, I'm just saying there's something meaningful here to be drawn by the fact that the number changes at all, right? Not that, like, there's some noise. Now, there's some really obvious conclusions that you can make. I think that Billy made a very valid point, which is just to say you can't necessarily assign the 17 and below population this characteristic. You can't just say 17 and below is just other or bruise or rogue or whatever. Like, some of those decks are real decks, they're interesting decks, and they comprise parts of the metagame. They're just not that popular, or they might be disparate, right? So, like, maybe if we combined all of the Mono Blue Storm players and the Iggy Pop players and the Mana Flare Early Harvest players or something, I don't know, like, whatever, like, if we just combine these groups into one, they actually become part of the population, and they become part of the population of trying players that have a meaningful positive win rate against some decks and a meaningful negative win rate against another decks. I think that's very interesting. But the fact that this happens with regards to just popularity is also interesting, which is to say that Mono Blue Dreadnought performs much better against the 17th most popular deck and below, which comprise, again, if I'm going to guess, I think that they comprise 20 to 30% of the metagame, or like what I would say is the expected metagame, which obviously is completely wild, right? Because I have no population data on LobsterCon. I mean, I'd have to go look at past LobsterCons and see how many decks actually are subcategory rogue. But it's meaningful that the number changes. It's the reason why we're here today. Besides, we were going to let Billy rant about Tide, but we actually never got to that point because we were too bogged down.
It's not worth talking about. It was emotional thinking.
Speaking of qualitative, I do actually think that if you don't make a data-driven argument for Tide being too strong, it is okay to make a qualitative argument to just be like, oh, Tide stifles creativity, and Tide being a quote-unquote pillar of the format, or Dreadnought being a quote-unquote pillar of the format, means that other things necessarily cannot happen within the confines of how the format's designed. Like recently people were talking about Pithing Needle, and I think Pithing Needle is super interesting because Survival of the Fittest is an extremely difficult card for a lot of decks to deal with. It is very easy to build a deck that loses to Survival of the Fittest and has no recourse around it, because disenchanting it doesn't necessarily stop them from getting the kind of value that they need of it. They can always draw the second one. They can play cards that get around your disenchant, et cetera, et cetera. And you basically can't mid-range against a survival deck. And that means that you can't, that may mean that you can't mid-range.
That's silly. Every deck can play Furnace. Furnace is fantastic against Survival of the Fittest.
Well, no, you just get your Tabby, and then the first thing you get is Tabby, then you get your Squee.
Yeah, but nobody plays one Furnace, right? Like, 2 Furnaces covers all 4 survivals. The Tabby just gets the first Furnace.
Right, but Not necessarily, because then they get Stampeding Wildebeest and then they pick up their Tabby and they kill the Furnace. Or they have Nantuko Vigilante, or et cetera, et cetera. Like, this doesn't make sense, right? Like, even if like you're like, okay, I'm going to play a mid-range deck with 4 Furnaces. We've talked at length on this podcast about the person getting to act first being at a huge advantage, right? Because it's just...
I don't know, man. As a person who's played a lot of survival recently, the first Furnace just buys them so much time they beat me half the time. Like, literally just...
Well, that might be because the black-green survival deck is much worse than, say, Elves, right?
Right.
Because Elves is also an operational deck without Survival of the Fittest, and black-green without Survival of the Fittest is just the Rock, and we can see what the Rock is.
No, I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying, like, I have a fair amount of recent experience playing with Furnaces against survival decks. I mean, primarily black-green survival, because that's the survival deck du jour, fine. And I played black-green survival myself a lot, and I'm telling you, I just straight up lose when they have a Furnace. Not because the Furnace is auto going to beat me, but because it costs 1 freaking mana and they have a whole deck.
Yeah, that's
right?
that's okay, but the texture of that is still important to acknowledge, which is just that, okay, if every other universe where they don't have Phyrexian Furnace is a universe where you're way, way, way ahead, then that doesn't mean that the problem is solved.
That's just having
right?
plan 1. Every deck has plan 1.
No, don't get me wrong.
Wait, okay, if I can please interject. So I think it is reasonable to claim that Phyrexian Furnace is a playable card is at least a playable card and a plausible counterplan against survival of the fittest. And you just said, Mike, plan 1. And I have a question. This may be too harsh a tangent. I apologize. You said plan 1. I have a question that everybody who listens to Spike Quality wants to know. What are the gears? What is gears? What is gearsing?
Okay, so
everybody.
No, we talked about it on the podcast. There's an article about this.
Okay.
No, we're not explaining this right now. I only have 7.
Let me answer.
I only have 7 minutes.
I will answer this
7
question.
minutes. Mike.
I wasn't here for an hour. Okay, here's the answer. I wrote an article about modern burn. Okay,
I can't read. What is gear?
No. I'm just giving you the context. I wrote an article about modern burn. It was a really good article. Everybody wants to extrapolate this concept, and I'll play along, right?
Okay.
If they want to extrapolate this concept to other formats and other decks, okay? So I will talk about pre-modern burn for a second, which is a pretty extensible for modern burn.
Got it.
Okay?
Yep.
So people start with this concept of burn as a combo deck, right? Like, I lace together 7 3 damage spells, and I
Storm
win
7, I win.
Okay?
Got it. Yep.
Storm 7. That is a really good way to deal 18 damage, right?
Exactly. That's the joke.
That's the joke, right? So I developed this concept because I was watching other people play, and I thought everyone understood how to play. But Lanny was coaching Rebel once, and Rebel makes a play that 9 out of 10 people would make, right? And Lanny's like, don't do that. And she's like, why? And Lanny's like, because Mike told me not to. And then she's like, well, how am I supposed to understand this? And he said, you're not. The card Lava Spike sucks. It was unplayable and limited. The only way you would know this is if Mike told you, right? So then I was just like, oh, not everybody knows all the freaking rules, right?
Okay.
So you have to play in a way that that you don't just end up doing 18 damage, right? So gear 1 is you try to do 20 damage with like Storm 7 is the way that you
bolt face is gear 1.
Yeah, that's bolt face. But it only works out. So this is Lanny's favorite thing. Gear 1 chooses you, right?
Got it. Yeah, totally.
And so that's usually a marriage of having a lot of 1 casting cost spells.
Yeah.
And like
Fire Blast, Pop. Yeah.
3 lands and low casting cost spells.
Yeah.
In almost every other situation, if you just try to like pop the opponent's face, you end up doing 18 and they race you.
Yeah.
Because you have a mismatch between your ability to deal 20 damage and the amount of finite resources you have. Because your deck doesn't draw enough cards, right?
Gear 1 is a case that you recognize, and good players recognize it early. Gear 1, got it. What's gear 2?
Gear 1, the statement of gear 1 is burn is a passable combo deck.
Yep.
Right? But people think about it as burn as a combo deck, but it's not a great combo deck. Look, part of the skill is to understand when it is a combo deck. Okay.
Yep.
That's gear 1.
Yep.
Gear 2 is suppression. All right. So, so the way that this works, and actually Lanny is a genius of this. He extrapolated this so much better than I ever did. Right.
Okay.
And so when he did some of this stuff, we started winning matches like 85%, where like the Duress Crew data says you win 55%. If you play like Lanny taught me, you win 85%, right? Okay. So I learned this from Patrick Sullivan, but then other people learned it from me. And that's basically, how do you use your burn cards in such a way to stop the opponent's plan and to kill their creatures and still have stuff left over to win the game, right?
Yep. So gear 2 is pup fanatic swinging in. You're killing creatures. No.
Gear 2 is like sit there and Grim Lavamancer their elves and then just wait until they're dead, right?
Okay.
And so Lanny's point of genius here was, I used to, and I think most people used to side out all of their sulfuric vortexes because they don't affect the battlefield. But Lanny's like, no, max out on your sulfuric vortexes in the Gear 2 games because it just gives you a way to win the game. Now you can use all your Grim Lavamancers, all your Curse Scroll activations, all your lightning bolts on their elves,
clear the board.
And they're just going to lose the game eventually because they're going to run out before you are, right? So just all credit to Lanny on that. So it was my idea, but Lanny made it better, okay?
Yep.
So that's Gear 2. Gear 3 is inevitability, okay?
Okay.
And so I did, like, again, I started from a point of not understanding that other people didn't understand how to play, right? So so this gear, before I wrote the article, it came out of, I used to play test a lot with like Shaheen Surani, who is like famous blue-white player, expensive sorcery master, right? I just remember a single game that he was playing where I float a Rift Bolt. Do you know what a Rift Bolt is?
I do.
Okay, I float a Rift Bolt, and I go, and going into Shaheen's third turn, and I'm like, you're going to do it. And he's just like, of course I'm going to do it. He can't fucking resist doing it. He casts a Teferi 3, and I'm like, how many years have we been playing? You're an idiot, right? He casts the Teferi 3 so that he's going to counter my Rift Bolt. So I killed him, right? So the thing is, the Gear 3 is like the wily way that you play so that you resolve all your burn spells, right? So like if you glue all of the different tricky ways that a burn player can resolve all of their burn spells through a handful of 7 counter spells, that's Gear 3. It's inevitability because you inevitably win. So the way that Lanny would say is just like, people think that that burn gets worse and control gets better as time goes on. But what they don't understand is burn has inevitability mode. You just have to be good at resolving the burn spells, right?
So this is a framework for assessing. To me, this sounds like proactivity, and it kind of smacks of. I feel like I'm gonna get punished for saying this, but it kind of smacks of like who's the beatdown.
It absolutely does. All of this is just a reframing, or not a reframing, a more robust way to examine roles in matches of Magic
and like decision making archetypes, right? Like when you say I'm going to beat Gear 1, you're basically saying I'm the beatdown. You're saying I'm Gear 2. You're saying I'm the control.
Yeah,
right?
And there's an understanding here, and not all decks have access to the same kind of versatility, and that's what kind of makes it fascinating, right? Because burn is a really easy example to use because your target is so clear, and to a certain extent, other decks similarly have this going on. Mono Blue Dreadnought is a great example, or different variants of Dreadnought are a great example, and basically, the thing. It's basically like pinpointing like your decision making of just being like taking a line that loses to your opponent's interaction is a good example of choosing Gear 1 when you need to find another gear, and you might not have the choice. So then there's like the make them havoc kind of thing, and then Gear 2 is basically understanding that the flip is true, that if you interact with your opponent, then you will stop them from winning, and as a result, you'll win eventually, right? So
and this has implications of like, am I foiling a
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Am I foiling to protect my dreadnought?
Exactly.
Or am I foiling to keep you from winning?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's so many examples can be fit under this framework of just being
Sure.
like, okay, should I counter this Goblin War Chief? Should I send this end of
The
turn
answer is
lightning blast?
probably yes.
End of turn lightning bolt at face or whatever.
Yeah. Do I Armageddon to keep from losing, or do I save my
Absolutely. Armageddon timing is a
until I
perfect
get-
one.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
Yeah, so-
we've got a setup for an entire another podcast, but I have to go.
Burn is a really unique position because all of its resources are finite. So the thing is, you have to make this decision, am I going to bolt face at the end of turn?
Yeah.
And part of the reason you have to make that decision is you don't have the mana to do it next turn.
And also, all of its resources are split cards. That's one of the biggest. That's one of the biggest differences about Burn, and it only applies to certain decks. So some decks just have creatures, and creatures can only attack or block. And a lot of decks are indifferent to blocking because they don't attack, or they're indifferent to attacking because they don't care about the battlefield. Burn is super interesting because every card is a split card between Lava Axe and Swords of Plowshares, and you actually have to make a choice with every single burn spell that you cast, what you're doing with it. And counterspell is the same way, just as you described. And other decks that have other tools that have this kind of split card modality, whereas White Weenie only has creatures, and they can only attack or block or get bigger. And so Mono Blue Dreadnought, the reason why we applied it to Mono Blue Dreadnought prior to Mishra's Factory, Flash of Insight, and Parallax Tide was because prior Mono Blue Dreadnought could only do one thing. And as a result, it made it very obvious what your opponent should be doing at any point in time. If they should be stockpiling removal, or if they should be trying to race you, that kind of stuff. I have to go. I'm sorry that I guess we'll just have to dedicate an entire... we have a lot of airtime dedicated to the 3 years, but we could definitely... talk about it more in the future.
We can talk about the Gears of Goblins, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
Right? So,
but not right now because
thank you for tolerating this tangent.
I
hope people got.
I literally must.
We were all wondering. We
can. Mike and I will text, and maybe we can put a part 2 onto this podcast that already ran in hour 45. I want to thank our guest Billy so much.
Thanks for having me.
Check out Hardcast.
Thanks for being so good to me in New York.
Oh no! Look, listen.
Who won yesterday?
You would do the same.
I thought we were gonna stream.
Mike Packer won with Enchantress.
He deserved it. He's good.
I'm sure you would do the same. Check out Hardcast everywhere you find podcasts. It's excellent stuff. They do a great job at sort of organized, topic-oriented, goal-oriented podcasting, which we will find none of here. So go check them out.
Vibes podcast.
Go check them out.
Not a serious podcast.
Data.duresscrew.com. We should have said at the very top. This is what we've been talking about this entire podcast. Data.duresscrew.com. I will see you guys later. Love, Spike.
Peace, guys.